All of you who join us after a break of more than 2.5 years for the 7th annual 2-day Gatekeepers of Governance Summit. Challenges continue to remain in the corporate governance space, and it is our expectation that many of them will get addressed in the next 2 days. A word about the organizers, Excellence Enablers, a corporate governance and board advisory consultancy firm that was set up by Mr. M. Damodaran a decade ago. The focus has been to keep the interests of the stakeholders at the center while demystifying corporate governance. Working with Mr. Damodaran on this endeavor are a number of highly experienced and renowned consultants and advisors, MBAs, company secretaries and lawyers who offer experience-based consultancy and courses on the journey from compliance through governance to performance. Coming to Gatekeepers of Governance, the collective experience and wisdom of our speakers and members of our audience at each summit helps to further a conversation that enriches our deliberations. So once again, a warm welcome to this year's summit, which features speakers who are leaders in their chosen fields and are uniquely positioned to shed light on solutions to complex matters. Over the next 2 days, ladies and gentlemen, we have 9 sessions that address different aspects of corporate governance. Thank you for joining us for this quest of best solutions, as it were. You'll also be happy to know that we are live streaming on YouTube on our very own channel, which is called Gatekeepers of Governance. So please tune in and be mindful that you will be on camera throughout the day. So please keep your mobile phones in the silent mode and adhere to the rules of business. Our first session is on growth with governance. Can ethics and economics coexist? Ethics and economics. Many say there is a basic incompatibility similar to mixing oil and water here. Several people believe that if growth is to be achieved at a desired pace, governance must take a backseat, and this is practiced by avoiding the highway of values and taking to the bylanes of expediency. Adhering to a code of ethics ensures that the stakeholders receive what they legitimately deserve. It also ensures integrity in operations. So we ask the question again, can ethics and economics coexist? I'd like to first request all our speakers to please come up on stage and Mr. Damodaran to please welcome our panelists. And we'll do it with flowers. We've got Mr. Deepak Parekh, Mr. Dinesh Khara, Mr. S.N. Subrahmanyan, and if I could request Mr. Damodaran to please do us the honors by presenting our panelists with flowers. Warm welcome, sir. Mr. Subrahmanyan. Thank you very much. Allow me now to introduce our speakers and our host, our main gatekeeper, Mr. M. Damodaran, who is the chairperson and founder of Excellence Enablers, a former civil servant and now an independent consultant and corporate advisor, coach and mentor. Mr. Damodaran serves on the boards of several reputed companies. He was formerly serving the government in various capacities and has been chairman of SEBI, IDBI, and the Unit Trust of India. Mr. Deepak Parekh spearheads India's premier housing finance company, HDFC, as its chairperson. HDFC has turned the dream of owning a home into a reality for millions of Indians across the country. His astute business acumen and farsightedness has not only made HDFC the leader in mortgages, but has also transformed it into India's leading financial services conglomerate with a presence in banking, asset management, life insurance, general insurance, real estate venture funds, education loans, and education. He's on the boards of several leading companies and has always been relied upon to formulate reform policies across sectors. He was one of the principal architects of the Satyam turnaround story. Mr. S.N. Subrahmanyan is the Managing Director and CEO of Larsen and Toubro and serves on the boards of directors of this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. SNS, as he's popularly known, is responsible for leading all of L&T's innumerable business initiatives to new growth levels. And under his stewardship, premised on scale and speed, L&T is riding on the enormous benefits of digitalization, big data, and predictive analysis. He places a premium on innovation, project management, and talent development, particularly in leadership roles. And in exceptionally difficult times, he ensured that L&T stood up and delivered. He leads the transformation of L&T into a modern corporate behemoth, a company that makes the things that makes India proud. Mr. Dinesh Khara is a career banker and the chairman of State Bank of India with a rich experience in all facets of banking. Before assuming office as chairman, Mr. Khara held several key positions such as MD Global Banking and Subsidiaries, MD Associates and Subsidiaries, MD and CEO SBI Mutual Funds, and Chief General Manager Bhopal Circle. As managing director, he led the international banking group, large corporate and treasury operations, in addition to the non-banking subsidiaries of the bank. He also successfully accomplished a major feat of merging SBI with its 5 associate banks and the Bharatiya Mahila Bank. With this, the State Bank of India joined the league of top 50 banks globally, and with his stewardship, SBI has reinforced its position of being the banker to every Indian. I'd like to now request Mr. M. Damodaran to please make the opening remarks and welcome our guests and speakers.
Friends, good morning. It was around 3 years ago that I stood here to welcome you to the previous edition of the Gatekeepers of Governance. 2 years, or as I prefer to call them, 2 non-years went by, and we are back again with the 7th edition of this summit. During the last 2 years, there were lots of persons that had doubts, lots of persons that had reservations, lots of persons who believed that we will not be able to make a comeback considering the toll that COVID had taken on everyone's energy and enthusiasm. But here we are, before you, because of the support of a large number of persons who encouraged us, emboldened us, and in fact pushed us into coming up with this particular summit. And I don't know how to thank them. I won't even try because I think it will be a futile effort. It will fall far short of what they deserve. Sponsors, speakers, participants, and friends who are not present here today for various reasons have all been behind this effort, have all been supporting us on our journey of promoting corporate governance with various types of interventions, this of course being our flagship event. Now, what do we hope to achieve? There is always one problem with conferences like this. All the believers are in the hall, and they don't need to be told many of the things that they will get to hear. All the people that don't believe are outside, and they are not interested in what corporate governance is, or what it means, or what its importance is. And therefore, I believe it is incumbent on all of us to spread the message that if you do business in the right fashion, you will see results over a period of time. Sometimes you get asked this question, don't good guys come second? In fact, there is a book by the name Good Guys Finish Second. Not necessarily. And if some not so good guys finish first, they have the gold medals taken back from them for various other mistakes that they make on the way to getting those gold medals. Some people talk about Maradona's hand of God, but in the entire history of football, there's been only 1 goal scored with the hand of God. Most of the other goals have been scored by persons whose feet were well grounded, and they didn't need to do things of that kind that escaped the attention of the referee and brought some kind of a disgrace or disrepute to the game. So the question before us today is, in this session, and I wanted that this be the first subject to address, because you get to hear this all the time: can growth and governance coexist? Can ethics and economics coexist? And to answer that question, and I don't want to anticipate anything that these three gentlemen will tell you, I've requested three of my friends to come and share their thoughts. Now, who are these gentlemen? You've read their introductions, you heard them, you obviously didn't need them, you know who they are. Not the kind of people that I would like to introduce, because in some sense that will insult the intelligence of the audience to attempt to introduce people of this eminence. But there is one thing that I wanted to stress, and it is that as you look at them, you find one person there, Mr. Deepak Parekh, who has promoted the movement to have every person live in his or her house, have a roof over the head. And I think that is an important requirement of mankind. He's the person who has done that for most of India. Sitting next to him, Mr. Dinesh Khara heads a bank which is, I think, which calls itself rightly the banker to every Indian. At one time I had told the then chairman, State Bank of India, you must say a banker to nearly every Indian. I can show you 2 or 3 that don't have accounts in the State Bank of India. But among the large number that I know, there must have been 2 or 3 that didn't have the accounts. So I think it's fairly justified claim. One provides the shelter, the other provides the financial muscle for the growth and developmental efforts of India. And my dear friend SNS, with whom I have the privilege of sitting on the same board for the last several years, is rightly hailed as the person that leads the company that makes the things that make India proud. I know, not a very elegant sentence, but I think it says what it needs to say, which is, if there are things that India is proud about, who makes them? Larsen and Toubro makes them. He leads the Larsen and Toubro effort. So you have people that give India its physical infrastructure, give India its shelter, give India its financial muscle, and who better than them to tell you how growth and governance can coexist. So with that, we'll get started. Thank you all for being with us today, and I think it's great to have 3 of you at the same time on the same platform addressing an issue of this kind. And to my friends in the audience, I cannot thank you enough. Every time that we have held these conferences, you've turned up in large numbers. You have asked the right questions of those that spoke here. This being the inaugural session, regrettably, we will not have any questions. That's the way it's structured. People who have contributed to what this summit has become over the years. With your continuing support, we will take it forward, we will take it higher, and we will do the kind of things that need to be done to ensure that people in the corporate arena walk on the straight and narrow path. Thank you for being with us. SNS. They've decided the batting order already.
Okay. Hello, good morning to all of you. I believe I'm a great speaker or a person who can address this kind of terrific audience with Mr. Dinesh Khara, Mr. Deepak Parekh, Mr. Damodharan, and many others sitting there. But then sometimes, as a tiny person, you don't have much of a choice. When Mr. Damodharan says, please be present and talk. I said, I'll make a presentation. He said, you're too young or too old for that, and audience is not matured enough for that nowadays. So you talk. So I'll try my best to talk. And he said, I talk well, but I don't know where he has heard me speak. But I'll try my best to talk on a topic which is tough, which is not easy, but which plays a major part, which has to play a major part, and I hope it continues to play a major part in and the existence and the way the organizations go forward. As one sees it, whether one likes it or not, corporations are the mainstays of economies. It will continue to be that as we move along a path which is capitalistic, which has to create jobs, which has to move the economy forward. Even in India today, there are many organizations which are, with both market cap and even sales-wise, greater than the GDPs of many countries, the GDPs of many of the states, and maybe the per capita earnings of these companies are far greater than the per capita of many of the states per se. And that means that huge and enormous wealth is concentrated within these organizations, not to say of the power that comes from the positions that many people hold within the organizations. For collective good, therefore, this wealth has to be managed well. The ethics of management has to be great. And the way one looks at how you portray yourself and how you are perceived is very, very important as one goes forward, and it's very difficult. Corporations allow the ownership and the management to be separate. In most cases it is, some cases it gets difficult. But as long as you keep it separate, it's pretty good. The concept of limited liability also allows corporations to take enormous risks. We as L&T take enormous risks. We do projects that are unbelievable, as good as what anybody else, the few top 10 companies in the world can do. Take on contract clauses which, if a proper lawyer or a good Samaritan reads it, will sew him in his coffin. But we take it. And somehow there's a feeling within many of us within the company that we can manage it. We deal with countries, we deal with leadership therein, we deal with other organizations which are far better, far bigger, and more ambitious, aspirations, and tougher than us. Not only in India, but in this part of the world. And if we are not willing to take the risks, we cannot grow. But at the same time, the risk has to be measured, calibrated, and somewhere in somebody's mind within the organization, there has to be a feeling that, hey, we're taking on this risk, we can manage it. And we do that. So far, so good. We have survived 82 years. We are surviving this year and continue to hope that we'll continue for a lot more many decades to come. It is very important to define the priorities. An organization has to grow. A competition will continue to be there. Superior ideas, startups with brilliant ideas, with niche capabilities will continue to come in, exist, grow, disappear and such. But one has to see how you take and propel the entity that you are with in a seamless manner. Businesses are motivated by profit. There's no taking away from it. I cannot run a business entity and say, I'm not interested in profits. We are interested in profit. Every little aspect of our life is governed by making positive cash flows and profits. Sometimes it is possible, sometimes it is not. Most times it is, and that's why where we are as Larsen and Toubro. So what is important in this profit-making ability of corporates is that the credibility, the ethicality, the way you go about it, the relationships that you manage, the relationships that you mature, the long-term point of view of how customer is important, and customer should be the soul and all of everything that you do, even while making this money. And all this with a proper set of governance, cleanliness, transparency, objective, and with a way to grow it. It's very important to do the right things at the right time. It's an easy sentence to make. It's not possible always. As far as we see, governance is a set of principles, processes, people, and systems. If all that work together, and if you can imbibe that culture across the organization, it works. It has to be run ethically, there's no doubt about it. When in a project kind of organization, still predominantly projects kind, even if a services business is project kind, our manufacturing business is also project kinds, risk is rewarding, but the assessment of risk has to be done. And that's never easy because the temptation of large values, temptation of achieving budgets, temptation of growing your entity within the organization, the business segment, whatever it is, becomes more paramount than sometimes assessing the risk. There are unlimited liability clauses. There are clauses which can lead to you think it's a build and scoot, but you're there as a build and squat for a very long time. And all this to assess is very difficult. It's not possible by one person. It's not possible by a risk committee. It has to come in as a culture. At any given point of time, we have more than 1,000 sites. And if you include our service businesses, more than 500, 600 clients. It's not easy to manage all that because there are multiple people taking multiple decisions at many, many places. And that can only work if you have proper systems and processes in place. It's not possible to centralize this. Over time, we are very clear that the few things that happen because we are in a society and bad apples do come in. We have been terribly tough on dishonesty. Any misappropriation anywhere, any misbehavior anywhere is not tolerated. People are terminated. It's a very difficult thing to do because sometimes it's your close colleague, it's a very senior person, one can say he's an indispensable at that point of time, but we have taken those tough calls. And we continue to take those tough calls because that's the only way to send a message across the organizations that certain behaviors are acceptable and certain is not and will not be tolerated. It's not easy to do that, but we continue to plow on that path in spite of losing some very good people. The intent is important. And if the intent is right, I think 9 out of 10 everything comes right. And it's important to pass on that message. Failures do happen, both at individual level and at organization level. And we tolerate it. We allow failures. I have failed many times, otherwise I wouldn't be where I am. But at the same time, one hopefully hopes that once you've done the same thing twice or thrice, at least fourth time you get it right. Because in a project organization, beyond that you do the profit and loss takes a hit. As we go forward, we find that regulation has become overbearing sometimes. It's a bit crazy at times. There are too many laws to follow. Too many rules to follow. Sometimes when I sit in some of these meetings, both our risk officers and financial guys, especially including our company secretary, comes out with too many rules and laws, and I tell them just dump it and get going. It's not the right thing to say, but what I mean is get the thing done in spite of all this. That is a bit overbearing nowadays, but that's the way life has become, and one has to see how to manage it within all those bylines. Long time back, early in my career, in Hyderabad, there was a hospital called Usha Mullapudi Hospital. Some of you from there might have known it. Dr. Mullapudi was a very famous surgeon in the United States. His wife was an anesthetist, and Usha is the name of his daughter. And we had to bid for the job. I was a young engineer in the proposals. We bid for the job. He said, Subrahmanyan, I'm giving you this job. You're not the lowest in price, but I don't have any supervision. I said, sir, you don't need to come to the site. After 14 months, please come inaugurate and take over the hospital. I was too junior. Must have been one of those lower end cadres. But I said, I'll take the bet. And we did it more or less, right till the end. He never had to come to site. He put a 75-year-old gentleman, a former PWD engineer at site just to certify the billing. But other than that, it was not there. But I felt that my bosses also allowed me to take the decision at that time, though some thought I was crazy. I used to keep flying to Hyderabad. I was not at site, but used to keep flying to Hyderabad. But I think these are the things that set the tone within an organization, that you need to do your job without supervision. You're not a kid anymore. You're a matured company. And why can't you do it yourself? And why do you need a consultant? And why do you need a PMC? And why do you need a client, etc., to supervise? Just give me the area, go away, come after 1 year, cut it, and you get what you want. That's the philosophy we try to put inside. And that means it's taking a lot of accountability, responsibility, and I call it ownership within ourselves to do it the way the client wants. I think that's a great feeling to have within the company, that even today we continue to do many things like that, and it goes pretty well in spite of a contract document being there. Mr. Damodaran did tell me to give some negative examples because it's about corporate governance. A few years back, we were not wanting to quote for a job in Bombay, and it was a partly done job. So normally we have a philosophy that we don't get into partly done jobs. To cut the long story short, the highest phoned me up and said, please take interest. I was reluctant, 3-4 times calls, and then I said, okay, we'll take an interest. A couple of weeks before the bid, I was told, that, are you serious about it? I said, damn it, you only asked me to quote for it. What is your problem right now? And they said, why don't you move away from it? I said, no. Now that I'm into it, I'll go for it, come what may. Enough phone calls to warn us off. We didn't agree. And then we realized that the tender was postponed by a couple of weeks. We said, fine, what are you going to try to do now? I am going to quote. And then we realized that they were recasting the pre-qualification aspects so that we don't get qualified. I said, this is great. So I employed the country's best lawyer and took it to the court. So judge asked that senior lawyer, are you disqualified or are you anticipating to be disqualified? Our lawyer had to say, we're anticipating to be disqualified. The judge said, now it's in my memory. Next time this court comes, I'll surely handle this case. And if you're disqualified, do come to me. So tender went on. We quoted. The rest is history. But you know, that guts you need to have. Today it's very easy to succumb to pressure. It's very easy to move away from things which you believe you ought to be. I was not interested. I was asked to get into it. And then you asked me to move away? Well, that doesn't work with Larsen and Toubro. I think that kind of messages is good to be sent, is important to be sent, and is important to be managed well, because it not only sends a message to the outside world, it also sends a message within the company that management is gutsy, it's got a vertebral column, and it can manage things. We have a serious problem in the governance of safety. That's something which is within the organization. We don't like it. We are pretty bad in it. We do have fatalities. We've been trying our best how to get it to some shape. There are organizations in the world which does perfectly clean job, 0 fatalities. We are not able to manage it. We've gone on heavy. I've been at sites, and some of the board members, including Mr. Esteemed, Mr. Damodaran, tells me, punish that guy, sack him. I said, I was also at site, sir. I didn't sack myself, I didn't punish myself. But it's coming to a point where we have to take serious actions. We've gone in for safety apps, we have digital cameras which point out incidents of safety that could occur, we have predictives, we have all kinds of stuff within the company to manage all this, but still it happens. But this is an aspect of governance where we lack, because a person lost his family, his sister to be married, parents to be looked after, children to be brought up, wife, etc., etc. It's not a good thing. But you know, we employ 200,000 staff and 300,000 laborers at any given point of time. And today's skill sets are getting difficult. Earlier days, a carpenter's son used to be a carpenter. Today, a carpenter's son wants to be a retail salesman or an IT engineer. And they don't want to go to site to do this CSR activity, which is concrete shuttering and reinforcement. And therefore, it's a tough job to get on with it. But we're trying our best. But this is one aspect where organizations need to improve, not only in the construction part of it, but in many other parts of our daily life too. The role of technology is very important in governance. We had within the organization one of the greatest digital movements, including our construction sites. Most of our sites are highly connected today. We can see everything, we get data from our equipment, rating their worker fatigue, safety, quality, the progress of works. There are even apps to see which material is coming from where, which is being lifted, what is the weight of the stuff being lifted, what is the crane, the lifting capacity, etc., etc. Everything is monitored digitally at various levels of the organization. I think what this has done is has brought in huge amount of data into the organizations, fantastic amount of transparency, and many decisions today are taken based on the fact that I see the data, I take the decision, and not on the fact that, hey, I've spent 30 years in the company, I've got a lot of white hairs and some hairs have fallen down, therefore I'm superior to take a decision. I think that's gone a long way in improving governance in the way we work our sites, operate our sites, and manage ourselves. And therefore technology has got a big role to play, and I'd advise everybody to look at that in a serious manner. A structured governance framework is very important. We have a board, and it consists of extremely senior people, very experienced from varieties of background. To the next level, we have the executive management committee, which is me and my senior colleagues who run the various businesses. And beyond that, we have various verticals, including some listed companies. Listed companies have their own boards, and the verticals are what is called as an IC board. We call it an independent company so that these verticals get a feeling that they are as independent as possible. That means people like me don't poke our noses too much into those workings of those organizations. And each of those ICs have their own board, which has a chairman who is an independent director of L&T's board, a few other people, and some eminent people from outside. And I think this makes our structure a little complicated, but I think it brings in a lot of discipline, ethicality, morality, and a sense of feeling that beyond the regular management, you have certain outside pressure to look at you, and I think that makes it all the more better and more governable and more understandable. This also helps that power is not concentrated on a single person. Power is moved to multiple people, and the decision making to a large extent is at various levels and through certain amount of consensus, and only the most difficult of decision making comes to the top and rest is taken up otherwise. We also have developed various filters within the organization. What value to quote, what kind of contracts to quote, which are the places to work, what kind of area we take in jobs, etc., etc. And therefore, those filters are very seriously implemented across the company, and it makes a big difference to the way we look at ourselves, the way we assess risk, and the way we go about. I think filters within a governance structure is very, very important because that helps you to keep things to be where they are. The role of board and the governance structure associated with this is extremely important. Any decision taken at the board is viewed as a sort of a gospel, and people take it extremely seriously. Any remark made, any views made, not only at the main board level, the executive management level, and even at the IC board levels, are viewed very, very seriously. I think that is extremely important to view it as such and take it forward. Now, this views of the board comes in variety of directions because of the nature of the people involved there, their own collective wisdom, their ideas, their presence in maybe other boards, and also their ability to assess some of the people inside and their frank view of whether that set of people can take the decision and take it forward, or whether there needs to be a certain amount of curb and curtailment of runaway ideas within that. It is easy to do that because when you have the concentration of wealth and power, it's easy to get up in the morning and decide I want to do that and I want to do this. Some of it would be okay, some of it is not. And therefore, to have a proper way to govern that is very, very important. So we have what is called as a 5-year strategic plan. We call it Lakshya. The Lakshya broadly defines what we do for the next 5 years. It's not cast in stone, but it's an important method and way forward. And from that follows the yearly budget. And that is something which is sanctimonious for us, because once a budget is drawn up and approved by the board, everybody goes all out to achieve it and take the company forward from its growth and prosperity point of view. I think I've tried to expand some of these views which we believe is keeping Larsen and Toubro where it is. At the end of the day, I would feel governance is about people, process, performance, and purpose. And if we can have people, process, performance, and purpose associated with any structure, whether it's a corporate entity, whether it's any other form of life, the results would be there. The key thing is to have, as I said, develop the vertebral column. It's not an easy world. It's a tough world. A major part of a business is associated with something called infrastructure. And infrastructure is not a great word from a governance point of view because many nasty things are associated with infrastructure. We have plowed a lonely path. We have a great platform and we continue to plow that lovely path. Some of these standards were set up by people before me, especially Mr. Naik, our chairman. And that image and that perception that this is what L&T is about is important to take it forward. I think the present management, including me, the biggest kartavya would be to preserve, persevere, and take it forward and hand it over to the next gen to take it forward in a similar manner. Mr. Damodaran, thank you very much. I hope what little I said made some little difference or ideal way to look at. And really appreciate you calling me, humbled by the fact that I could have this talk in front of you and many other seniors. Thank you very much, sir. Good luck, all the very best. And if I don't meet you before the new year, a very happy Merry Christmas and a very happy and prosperous New Year to all of you. Thank you.
Deepak?
Mr. Damodaran, Mr. Khara, Mr. Subrahmanyan, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Undisputedly, gatekeepers of governance is the go-to conference on corporate governance in India. Year after year, barring the 2 COVID years, my friend Damo has consistently picked pertinent themes on corporate governance and encouraged people at this conference to discuss and debate issues in a free and frank manner. Damo has the knack of raising his own bar every year, and bar of excellence each year, staying true to his own trademark, excellence enablers. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are both well into their 90s, but they remain gurus of corporate governance and continue to champion this cause through their practical experiences and common sense advice. Damo, you may take a leaf from that and from their book and keep leading gatekeepers of governance for many, many more years to come. India needs champions of corporate governance who have experience, who have deep knowledge, and most importantly, drive and passion to help organizations excel in governance. Today, India is one of the few countries in the world that has more tailwinds than headwinds. India is conspicuous exception against stalling or falling global growth. To my mind, sustainable long-term growth and governance are strongly correlated. We all know that India is a bright spot today and everyone's talking about it. And it's just not because the global outlook is clouded with heightened geopolitical risks, a trust deficit, recessionary fears, cost of living crisis. The fundamental changes that are taking place in our country, in the Indian economy, are very evident. Much of these changes seen on the ground is because of significant institutional and legislative reforms, particularly on governance, which has been taken. Take, for instance, the GST, e-way bills, RERA, direct fund transfers, direct benefit transfers, e-bidding, digital payments, IBC, faceless tax assessments are some amongst many several others initiatives taken for structural change in our country. For certain, there can be nothing more beneficial for an economy than instituting governance reforms. Yet we remain to be alert, for as they say, a lot of good things happen in bad times, and conversely, a lot of bad things can happen also in good times. Stronger governance reforms at the state level, continuing focus on improving the ease of doing business, having a stable regulatory and tax regime which can offer confidence to long-term investors and those with capital expenditure plans, and unclogging, the most important is unclogging the 4.7 crore cases, pending cases in our courts. If we handle this, it will catapult India to a completely different level. I remain confident that Governance Reforms 2.0 is very much on the government's agenda. Now, repeatedly, one has observed that behind each financial crisis, there is a governance failure. Yet it is the entire system that gets impacted. An eruption of a corporate or a financial crisis almost always means tightening of rules, tightening of regulations, and increased compliances for all. Mr. SNS also said the same thing about regulations. Look at the global financial crisis of 2008. At the crux of this crisis was mismanagement of risk. Or as they say, it was well known that it was about the over 50s not knowing what the under 30s were doing in the derivatives market. In return, the system got saddled with humongous compliance issues through the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which still continues today. Another example is of siphoning funds through multi-layer companies. Because of few miscreants, all companies now have to comply with very stringent related party transactions, disclosures. And this places considerable onus, considerable responsibility on the audit committee as well. Yet how can we blame the regulators? Where there is any governance failure involving financial impropriety, who gets the blame? It's the regulators then always get the drubbing first. They get blamed for sleeping at the wheel. Retaining the trust of a regulator is paramount. The bottom line is that the regulated entities ultimately get what they deserve. If regulated entities want light touch regulation, they have to demonstrate, we have to demonstrate and earn it at a system level. So the ultimate objective of corporate governance systems must be simpler, not more complicated. They must rely more on trust and ethical behavior rather than compliance. But the question always comes up, how do we get always getting tied up in knots as far as corporate governance is concerned? The simple answer is because it's all about people and varying levels of integrity. Time and again, one reflects upon governance practices in organizations. Time and again, it is short-termism that creates the problem. And short-termism impacts the corporate behavior. The vexing question remains, where does the buck stop? Why is the demonstrative effect by the leader so important? Will some brash new age leaders, startups with deep pockets survive the long run despite scant consideration of governance? To my mind, organizations survive the long-term business cycles when they have leaders and teams who enjoy their work, who feel excited about coming to work every day, who are excited about working in teams and instinctively feel and think that they are owners of the firm. The role of the board then isn't about firefighting, but the board can then focus on important matters like strategy and future. Good leaders aren't afraid of hiring smarter people because they keep their insecurities aside and look for the best outcomes. As corporates get more diversified in their businesses and as financial institutions get too large across conglomerates, across different financial services, it becomes more important for a leader to strike a fine balance of giving the confidence to allow businesses to run independently. Mr. SNS also talked about it. Number of subsidiaries, Larsen and Toubro have, State Bank have, we have. We have to appoint good managers, delegate, and let them get on with the work. As they say, the golden rule is delegate just shy of abdication. And of course, work relentlessly on work culture. There can be nothing more value destructive for an organization than the loss of good and strong value-based culture. To my mind, the biggest corporate governance sin and a clear failure of the role of the board is deteriorating values. Growth with governance must be non-negotiable. Economics and ethics are not trade-offs. They are complementary. Let me give you a few nuggets of advice. Guard against leverage. It's always a double-edged sword. In good times, leverage amplifies your profit. In bad time, it ruins you, it kills you. Financial greed is infectious and continues to remain the biggest downfall of people and organizations. Negotiate well and smartly, not at the cost of profit maximization. Leave some money on the table for the investors. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Organizations need to tell the truth as it is. Stakeholders can take the bad news, but they hate being surprised of hearing the bad news. Stay well capitalized, stay liquid. You never know when organizations need the money because of unpredictable situations. Don't compromise, don't overpromise what you cannot deliver. I know there is a dedicated session later on during the day on ESG, but let me offer a couple of thoughts on this, since ESG now is center stage in any boardroom discussions. While India may look at global best practices, it is important to have ESG frameworks that work for our country. Trace the journey of corporate governance in India. Before we embraced our own corporate governance framework, we had to rely on United Kingdom's Cadbury Committee report. Damodaran, you may know that. Or we had to rely on the United States Blue Ribbon Committee report. Indian boards began to truly embrace corporate governance in a much wider manner only when CII took the lead in 1996, which was later followed up by SEBI's framework, which has evolved over the years. In short, corporate governance was accorded its due in India only when we had our own governance framework. Credit must be given to SEBI for the business responsibility and sustainability reporting framework. All of us have to do a BRSR attached to our annual report. This is meaningful. It is an indigenous framework. It's equally important for institutional investors to know what is our responsibility and what is our commitment. So it is true that globally too, boards are grappling with trying to better understand climate risks and the impact it can have on businesses. Today, no one can deny the risks of climate change. What is critical is the availability of finance to enable necessary green transitions. We have held our ground in India on the climate debate so far, and one is seeing encouraging transformational progress in India. Look at the emphasis government is giving on renewables or on electric vehicles, green hydrogen, PLI, production link incentives for components like solar panels and others. So we are moving in the absolute right direction according to me. And the announcement recently by the government of sovereign green bond framework is another significant step for us in India. Green governance will be critical for India, especially if we want to attract long-term capital. Today, institutional investors ask us the first question: what are you doing for climate change? What are you doing for controlling the effluents? For what are you doing for governance on power, on water? These are the questions they're asked. What is your view? Is the board discussing these items? And we only buy stocks where there is proper ESG commitment by the board and by the management. We get that question asked first every time in the last 6 months. Finally, to conclude, here are some common sense pointers on governance. Corporate governance is not something you leave behind. Corporate governance is not something you leave behind after you attend a board meeting or you leave behind in the office after you go home. It is about your inner conscience that tells you the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. It is an attitude of mind that is changing with times but unchanging in principles. Corporate governance is about values, but values have a value only if its value is valued. So I'm quite confident that India will, and Indian corporates are well aware that corporate governance is the future. If they want to survive, if they want to get more shareholders, they will have to follow best corporate governance practices. It is reflected directly on the stock market, on your prices. I think institutional investors and even retail investors are so smart these days. They know which companies follow corporate governance principles, which companies there's a gray area. So we can't leave it. You have to follow corporate governance. And I remain confident that we will deliver, India will deliver in the years to come like never before. So I'm optimistic, I'm extremely optimistic, that governance will take center stage in almost all companies in the years to come. Thank you, Damo. I just wanted to say one thing. We all are crazy and passionate about cricket. Damo is also keen about cricket, but no one knows that he is even more keen and passionate about soccer, football. He has even given commentaries in football. I won't be surprised if he is giving commentary during the World Cup in Qatar, because he's an expert commentator on football. Thank you. Did you know that? Did you know that? No, I didn't know you didn't know that.
I'll be writing about it.
No one knows that.
Thank you.
Very few.
No one knows that.
Very good morning to all of you. And my special thanks to Mr. Damodran for giving an opportunity to be with all of you today morning. Well, when it comes to growth with governance, the question is, can ethics and economic coexist? I think in the current kind of economic environment and the kind of uncertain times where we are living today, which are characterized by the significant geopolitical events whose reverberations will be strongly felt in the decades to come, perhaps it is one of the very apt topic. Also, we are observing, we are living in an age of innovation and disruptions. And the new progressive entities which are coming into existence, perhaps they are very clearly focused in terms of finding the solution for a problem. And governance probably is something which has to be sort of provided as an add-on, and that can be generally provided by the boards of such entities, which have the benefit of the senior leadership who have lived through difficult times and have seen a very different age when probably it was all evolving. The cornerstone of such architecture, to my mind, would essentially be dependent upon the ethically accepting the good governance. It is not merely providing them inputs, it has to be accepted by such young entrepreneurs too. The study of ethics in the economic life is growing quite exponentially. The controversies which have taken place in past couple of years, more so in the corporate history and across the cross sections, highlights the destructive power a few can bring on an enterprise and can shake up the confidence of very large investors community and various stakeholders. These moral failings have caused problems, and these problems have been experienced across the sectors. The fact remains that the justice matters to economic life in many ways. A just society needs court and judges to enforce contracts and upholds the right as mandated by the Constitution. But formal justice pales in comparison to the informal justice. The moral code every citizen carries is something which is very important, which helps them in taking decisions in their day-to-day life. It is equally relevant for employee, the entrepreneur, the business owner, the customer and the consumer. I think we in the banking system experience it on a daily basis. Unless and until a bank of our size, which has got 250,000 plus employees, who are dependent upon an ecosystem where more than 67,000 BCs are very much part of the society from which they come from, where so many do's and don'ts probably have no meaning. So when we blend the trust which we enjoy from our customers with our employees and also the ecosystem player where we don't have much of formal control, I think to my mind it is actually the ethics which becomes the most important, and how to really ensure that we pass on this message quite effectively to them. There are certain absolute ethical standards. They actually play a very important role in the economic life. And for this very reason, perhaps parents and teachers struggle to develop the character of the young people in the early age, so that these people, when they grow up, they should remain responsible towards their family, to the society, and to the community and the nation. Economics, of course, play a very, very critical role through its constant endeavor to improve the society, aligning various verticals that shape the forces of nature for optimal efficiency. It provides resources to manpower, wages to distribution of wealth. Normative economic invariably examines the cost and benefit of alternative policies. Deciding among these alternatives requires people to rank various goals, and their rankings are determined by the ethical value which they pursue. I think it would be erroneous thought to assume that it is only the ethics which matters. We have a very rich cultural heritage. Most religious and philosophical traditions ask, do the end justify the means? And are there duties that people should uphold regardless of the consequences? This is something which is very critical in the way we have been all brought up. Some might even ask, would the proposed policy help or hurt the development of virtue in our community? These questions are not distractions in society or in an economic class. Rather, they encourage people to exercise their moral imaginations and develop an analytical perspective which enhances the societal capabilities in a very complex world. Today, in the corporate world, while we talk about the moral values, the emerging prominence of the management concepts like corporate governance, business ethics, and corporate sustainability are some of the expressions through which the emerging ethical instincts in the corporate world is trying to express and embody itself in the multiple ways of the corporate life cycle. In this context, it is pertinent to ask a very critical questions. What could be the pillars of growth in such a situation? To my mind, the growth, governance, ethics, and economics, they have a very significant interplay, and once they get into action, the society actually improves quite a lot. I would also like to quote Sri Aurobindo, who decades ago foretold, to be able to do the right thing in the right way, in each case and at every moment, one must be in the right consciousness. This right state of consciousness should transcend from citizens to the corporate citizens. Without much effort, and also unless and until it is practiced, it causes disruptions which are beyond imagination. Inner consciousness is an awareness, the capacity to listen to the inner voice that tells us that there is something looking up at us and also warns that there is someone who is watching us. This is, to my mind, is one of the very important component, irrespective of what the regulatory requirements are, unless and until each one of us in the board level start practicing this, we will have the challenges. Because the corporate governance principles or the codes which are described, it can be merely a tick box, unless and until it is practiced in the right spirit. The great thought and deed of a legendary human being, Mahatma Gandhi to Mother Teresa, are the result of these consciousness only. The scams happening in the select business establishments are also the result of corresponding absence of this consciousness. The quality of our consciousness depends on the part of consciousness which we live. There are two parts in our consciousness. First is the lower physical vital being, driven predominantly by the self-interest, material needs and desire, so slippery that it has a constant danger of degenerating into greed. The second is the higher mental, moral and spiritual being, seeking for truth, beauty, goodness, harmony and unity. The corporate governance, to be truly effective and enduring, has to be based on this higher order of human nature. An important quality of this higher part of human nature is actually the self-governance. The higher self in us does not need the threat of external law or the lure of an external reward to remain good or ethical. We are individually and collectively still far away from the ideal concept of self-governing individual in a self-governing community. We still need laws because we are not yet ready for the self-governance. But we must keep this ideal as a pole star and gradually progress to evolve towards it through a combination of enlightened regulation of external environment and inner transformation through education and inner discipline. Corporate governance should actually be an endeavor to create corporate consciousness and an environment in which all those who are charged with governance and those who are governed display genuine ethical, social and ecological responsibilities. Business ethics is emerging as one of the important branches of applied ethics. Business ethics is the application of general ethical ideas to business, pointing to the moral principles and standards and an evolving yet time-tested code of conduct that business enterprises and its key management personals are expected to follow. Here I am reminded of we as a bank, we have an existence of more than 18, we came into existence in 1806 and 216 years of existence. Those are the days when perhaps there was no elaborate code of conduct for the corporate governance, but a couple of days back I had an opportunity of looking into the minute book of our board. It was somewhere in the year 1930. And in 1930, the bank decided to buy a property, and the then chairman decided to stay away from the proceedings of the meeting because he happened to know the seller of the property. So this is what, so once again it is the inner consciousness which is actually reflected, and that is something which we are very proud of, our history and heritage, where we have been given these values from very early days, and this is something which I have seen practicing. I have seen it documented in the minute book, and I felt very proud of the kind of our seniors who practice such kind of things. So there is a kind of a social contract between the society and the business, by which the society expects the business to work in its interest. Society creates and accepts the business enterprises and expect them to work in a manner which is not detrimental to the well-being and their interest. Eventually it is the ethical conduct in its long term which serves such kind of goals. Very often it is said that whether ethics and business can coexist. This was a very relevant question, but I am also reminded of the fact that as an economic principle, perhaps maximization of profit would be the goal, but is that really so? I think it is the optimization of the profit, because we all know that there are boundary conditions in which all of us have to operate, and that is one of the reasons why we don't strive for the maximization and we strive for the optimization, so that the conflicting interest of various stakeholders should also get served. But eventually it may be in the near term they are the conflicting interest, but overall they are for the overall good, and perhaps if at all they are practiced in long term, it eventually stands the society in a much better place. So that's why the ethical business behavior is not only about the good business, but about the good citizenship as well. morally conscious business enterprises, and their leaders have created names and built great business empires. They serve customers with good quality products at fair price, treat their employees with great respect, reward their shareholders with good returns, and contribute their fair share to sustain the corporate responsibility too. Business can prosper only when a society is stable and peaceful, and I think this is the most relevant statement in the today's context when whole of globe is looking very, very risky. Unethical business practices create distrust, disorder, and turmoil in the society over time. While referring to the business activities, I humbly quote once again to Mahatma Gandhi ji, who said that all businesses have a social responsibility, which has little to do with its ordinary economic activity. Consequently, in present days, the point of view should be to expand much beyond merely the corporate social responsibility by incorporating ethics in everyday thought and deed through the inner engineering. Drawing on the source of competitive advantage performance theory, it is argued that the firms are perceived ethical, only those firms are perceived ethical who are in a position to generate and impact the profitability. Data from the Indian businesses indicate that ethical business practices lead firms to a superior profitability, through acquisition of the competitive advantage. However, such results also suggest that the effects in the near term are at times not too encouraging. So I think one should stay the course irrespective of the near term results. And in today's kind of a situation when we are navigating through a time with many notions and perceptions are being broken, deep disruptions and mighty collaborations are the routine affairs, partnerships are getting forged across boundaries, and shape of corporate India is undergoing a tectonic shift, though for the better. We have the right policy prism that have created robust, dynamic, reliable architecture to support growth and innovation and benefit all. We are at the cusp of emerging from the past and its daunting memories, re-scripting a story as the world looks at India with awe. It is up to the industry and its captain to give a new rule book to the world where ethics and economics coexist in harmony. The premium of corporate governance has growth as its dividend. Together, I believe no task is insurmountable for our collective prowess in the new India of today. Thank you very much for giving a patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khara. We'll now have the floor open to questions if Mr. Damodaran agrees.
No questions.
No questions? Okay, so if I could request...
Unless any of you want to take questions. No.
Okay, if I could request Mr. Damodaran to please do us the honors of presenting each of our panelists with a small little gift that we have. We have a very interesting gift this year, which is a caricature of our panelist, Mr. Deepak Parekh.
Okay.
We also have a certificate.
Open.
We also have a certificate, sir, which is inside the bag, which... This is a caricature done by an artist who is inside the hall. We're not going to tell you where he is, but he's going to be making pictures of all our panelists here. So we've got mementos for each of our guests.
Okay.
One for Mr. Subrahmanyan.
It doesn't look like you at all.
Each of our panelists will also get a certificate
Put some hair on my head.
which states that 10 trees have been planted in each of their names in the Sundarbans. So we're trying to contribute to the preservation of our planet. We've got one for Mr. Dinesh Khara.
Yeah. Yes. So he's caught you in action with this.
So it's something for each of you to look back at your participation
Certificate of trees is here. Thank you.
at the Gatekeepers of Governance Summit. Thank you very much. Mr. Damodaran, would you like to add any words, or shall we close the session here?
If you insist, yes. No, I'm not going to speak for long. SNS was giving me those looks like, are you now going to inflict another speech on us? Far from it. I just wanted to say thank you to all these three gentlemen for sharing their insights. I had a number of takeaways. I didn't take notes, but it's all here. I heard them very seriously, and I will, of course, try and build on what they have shared with you. But thank you all for being here during the inaugural session.